Welcome to this very interesting session on effective communication skills. At the end of the session, hopefully, you'll be able to understand how to groom and improve on your communication skills. All right, so right before we dive in, don't forget to take your pre test at this link. You are supposed to take this test before you listen to the entire session. And once again, my name is Izini Uzoije, and I'll be taking you through this session. Right, so the objectives that we're going to be looking at are the elements of the effective communication process and the factors that influence it, the barriers that can occur towards effective communication and how to overcome them, then how you can understand what is the difference between verbal and non-verbal communication methods, and eventually how to communicate in respectful and non-judgmental ways. So, what is communication? If you really think about it, you have a faint understanding of what communication is, and it's basically how you exchange information between individuals through a communication system of symbols, signs, or behavior. So, what this eventually means is communication is the giving and receiving of information, all right, between mostly individuals, and it can be in any form. It can be in form of words, it can be via spoken words, and it can also be non-verbal, right? So communication must not be through speech. Communication could be through signs, all right, through attitudes. So I want you to understand, if you really think through how parents used to communicate when you were much younger, maybe you're in front of guests at your family house, and then you did something that they don't really want to continue doing. They may just give you a side glance, and that side glance it speaks volumes. With it, you understand, oh, stop what you're doing, or oh, leave this place, something like that. They've communicated something to you. They didn't really need to call you by name to tell you to stop what you're doing. They didn't really need to tell you to leave that place. But with that side glance, they were able to communicate to you, and then you took the next action. So communication means that information is exchanged between individuals, and it can be through symbols, it can be through signs, it can be through words or attitudes and behavior. All right. Now, effective communication is actually when communication between two or more persons is successfully delivered, received, and understood. So you see that three things stand out there: delivered, received, and understood. When these three things are actually done, then that communication has been effectively communicated. When the communication has been delivered to the intended person, the intended person received it, the intended person understood it, then you can say that communication was effectively done. So several times people are able to say things, are able to give out signs and things like that, but then they may not really be sure whether it was effectively communicated. And that is why in this process that we set up for this soft skills training, we tell you to take the pre-test and the post-test, because we want to make sure that at the end we're able to understand something. We also tell you to ask questions on Slack, because we want to make sure that it was understood very well. And then from the questions, we're able to clarify everybody that was slightly confused. So you see that communication can be ineffective as well. And if you want to make sure that it's effective, then you need to ensure that it is delivered, it is received by the person you sent it to, and then it is understood by that person as well. Now, communication is very, very important in our day to day life, in our businesses, in our careers, and it builds and maintains productive relationships. If you really think about it, all that we're doing in life, whether you're going to be working on your own, setting up business, or actually working for an organization, you will actually be doing a lot of things with human beings. And when you're working with human beings, you need to establish productive relationships. Even if you were working on your own and you are going to be getting clients, you need to understand what your clients expect you to deliver on. If you're working in an organization, you need to understand what the organization's goals are, what they expect you to deliver on, and so on and so forth. So communication is like the life wire of everything that we do when it comes to relationships, when it comes to work. Also, communication promotes sharing of new ideas, innovation, and also enhances cooperation. So it's still buttressing the facts we stated earlier. because when you're working with people, you will need to cooperate with them. And when you are able to effectively communicate, you are able to work better with them. And then because you can communicate, you can share the ideas that come to your mind. You can begin to work on different innovative things together because everybody can communicate and understand each other. And good communication boosts the morale among teams, right? When there is effective and good communication in between teams, in between members of a team, then you see that they tend to work together and produce more results. It leads to a strong team. So good communication is something that needs to be present in every organization amongst teams. All right, let's go further. Good communication helps in the development of a business. All right, when you're actually starting a business and or you are joining an organization, everybody needs to understand the goal of that organization. Everybody needs to know how to work on the business processes, how to deliver to clients. Everything needs to be clear, because when everybody is clear, then that business, that organization can grow and become something bigger. So communication is very essential. Also, it can act, you need it as a source of information. So when you are communicating effectively with people, you get to know information that can help in decision making processes of every business. So there's a lot of importance for communication, and I hope with all of this you're already seeing how important it is for your day-to-day life, for your work, and all of that. You need it to help in building people's attitude. The thing is, everybody is a work in progress, and sometimes people need more work in a certain area. And how would they know that? Is when it's communicated to them. Okay, is when it's brought to their notice that, oh, these are some areas you can improve on. This is how you can improve on it. And then they get to know that. How would they get to know that? Because you even communicated it and they understood it in the first place. So all of these things are the beauties and the importance of communication. So, what are the types of communication that exist? There are four different types we're going to be looking at right now. One is verbal, the second is non-verbal, the third is formal, and the fourth is informal. Now, verbal communication is the type that is in spoken words, it's in the form of spoken words or written form. So you are hearing my voice right now, you're seeing the words on the screen. This is verbal communication. All right. So this is done almost everywhere. Everybody that can speak, that has the ability to speak, can actually do verbal communication very well. All right. But then sometimes we could say something and then the next person you're saying to do does not understand it. All right. So how we communicate is also important. How we say the things that we say is also important. All right. So it's not just by saying things, it's about how did you deliver it? How was the form that you delivered it as? It's also important so that when it's clear, the other person that is receiving it can understand it very well. Now let's look at non-verbal communication. Here the messages are relayed without the transmission of words. What do I mean? You don't need to say anything, you don't need to speak anything, right? But with your gestures, your body language, symbols, expressions, maybe facial expressions, then you can be able to understand what the other person is saying. So the example I gave earlier still stands. Maybe when you were younger, or even still right now, people can communicate to you with just a glance, with just a wink. How they look at you, and then you understand exactly what they are trying to say in their minds. So most of the time, non-verbal communication supplements verbal communication. So what do I mean by this? Someone may be talking to you, but if you see the expression on their face, you will now get to understand their true feelings, the true communication, the true things that they want to communicate to you. So someone may be saying something, and then you look at the person's face, and you get to see, oh, this person is a bit angry, and it gets you to understand and actually process that information he's passing to you better. So sometimes communication can also be in this non-verbal communication plays out in body language. So for instance, you are in a meeting and everybody is downcast. They don't really need to tell you we are downcast. When you just look at their faces and you see the moody faces, you get it immediately that something is wrong, and maybe you can now ask them questions to get them talking. So the thing is, We need to also understand that some people do not really speak, all right? So the deaf and the dumb do not always supplement non-verbal communication with verbal communication. So you see, most of the time, the deaf and the dumb, they actually use sign language to their advantage. You see them gesticulating and they understand themselves very well. And that's because they've been able to understand and develop all those gestures into alphabets and words and are able to communicate it with each other. And they actually people that are not deaf and dumb that can also communicate effectively via sign language, because that is actually another language on its own, and that is also a beautiful thing. Now let's look at formal communication. All right, so in formal communication, you see that certain rules or principles are followed when communicating messages. Usually, you would see formal communication in your workplace or very formal environments like bigger organizations, and there you see that communication may be through email, through reports, the language could also be very formal. So, usually in a bigger organization, maybe you deliver on a task, instead of you to come and verbally explain, oh, I've done this, I've done that, there may be a report that is expected of you to do because they want you to document it. All right. So this is important that in any place you're working at or any organization, business you want to set up, you will need to determine what kind of communication would you want for your employees, for employees to report to you. Or if you're working in another organization, you will need to understand what kind of communication is expected of you as an employee for reporting about your own progress, about your own um, um, progress and your tasks that you've completed. Now let's look at informal communication. This kind of communication, you see that it's not very formal. Like there's a loosening of grip. There's free speaking that is encouraged, right? So informal is not to be confused for rude or anyhowness. But with informal communication, you see that there's no restriction on really conveying certain things. All right, you can actually use some slangs and it will be understood. So you would see this happening amongst friends, amongst family. All right. You see it in certain workplaces, in certain teams, in certain workplaces, informal communication is also allowed. So you really need to understand what works in your organization, or if you're setting up one, what you would want to work there. So these are the four different types of communication you can see. Let's look at the skills that are needed for effective communication. So you need to have good listening skill. All right. You need to understand that as someone is communicating to you, you need to listen effectively. You need to pay attention. It's when you pay attention that you get to start listening. So sometimes people actually hear someone speaking, and they appear to be listening, but they are not really paying attention, so they don't understand what is being communicated. So for you to understand what the other person is communicating, you actually need to listen and listen all right. Another skill that is needed is clarity. Clarity. So that means you need to be clear on what you're saying to your receiver. Okay, so if you're saying something and then the other person is not understanding it, maybe you may need to be clearer. Maybe the language you're using is filled with a lot of big grammar, and you may need to break it down and use simpler grammar, simpler English that'll be easy to understand. Clarity is very important for effective communication. The other person on the other end needs to understand what you are trying to say. Needs to be able to put those words to put those things that he's hearing in his own words, and it makes sense for him as well. Then another skill that is needed for effective communication is friendliness. So I don't know whether I need to over explain this, but we all know that when you feel like there's an unfriendly atmosphere, there's this discomfort that happens. When you're in an unfriendly atmosphere, it's almost like you spend more time worrying about being comfortable, spend more time worrying about what could go wrong than actually paying attention. So a friendliness is very important for effective communication. There needs to be like an atmosphere that you will need to develop, or you need to cultivate around where you are, so that the people that are listening to you can actually pay attention. So friendliness is a key that is important for effective communication. Another skill that is needed for effective communication is confidence. Confidence. So why is confidence important? Especially when you are the one communicating to the other person, you will need to develop confidence so that the other person does not spend more time worrying about you making mistakes with your English, with your stuttering. Maybe if you're in front of a stage and you're supposed to give a speech, can you actually be confident enough to do that? Or would you spend more time worrying about, oh, everybody will see my mistake, and then you make a lot of mistakes, and then because when someone is not confident, when someone is on stage making a speech and is not confident, the entire crowd starts to get distracted. Everybody that was supposed to pay attention starts to get distracted, starts to, they tend to remove their mind, remove their attention from that situation in hopes that they can make the person less uncomfortable. So in that situation, it means that anything that you as a speaker is saying, your audience is no longer hearing it. So it's important to be confident, develop confidence. And I use the word develop because confidence is something that can be improved on, that can be worked on. You may start out today and start practicing in front of the mirror on how to actually be able to speak in front of large audiences and even in front of small audiences confidently. Now, another important skill is understanding non-verbal cues. You need to actually be the sort of person that starts looking out for non-verbal cues because, as I mentioned, sometimes it's also used to communicate. It's not only via words, not only via writings that things are communicated. So you need to look out for non-verbal cues. And you also need to look out for people that may not be able to understand non-verbal cues. They're actually individuals that may have intellectual disorders like autism, and they don't really understand nonverbal cues. They don't know what it means for you to have a frown on your face or for you to look uncomfortable or unhappy. So when you see those sort of individuals, you need to also try to understand them and maybe effectively communicate with them with only verbal cues. Then you always need to check for understanding. Always check for understanding. And that's why at the end of this session, I also ask you, do you have any questions? Because I want to make sure that you understood everything that I communicated. Check for understanding. Ask the other person, did you get what I said? All right. You could even ask the person to repeat it if it needs to be repeated, just to be sure that you communicated effectively. So, I hope you've been enjoying this session so far. If you have, drop a comment and let me know. Let's look at the barriers that can occur towards effective communication. What are the barriers that can come up and then make the other person that you're communicating to not understand you? Number one is use of jargons. So what are jargons? You're using, words that are not easy to understand, maybe slangs, right? And then the other person is really struggling to understand. You're telling a slang that is popular for your age range may not be popular for somebody that is 60 years, for instance. And you're trying to use those slangs to communicate to that person. The person may tell you, I don't understand. That's something that could happen when you're using slangs that are popular within your friend circle for a lot of people that don't really understand it. Then you see that it's not effectively communicated. Whatever you want to say may not be effectively communicated. Another thing is distractions. Um, in a learning environment when you actually have distractions everywhere so that nobody actually understands anything that's going on, and sometimes distractions may not even be external. It may not be from the noise from outside or from what people are doing from outside. It could also be internal. Maybe the person is sitting down and is thinking through a lot of things in his mind or in her mind. He or she has already traveled to Paris and is thinking of something else, right? So distractions are things that could be a barrier to effective communication. So it's always important that when you're actually trying to do something, you starve every distraction that could come up, whether it's internal distraction, the things that you're thinking of, or external distraction, maybe noises, loud music. Make sure that you remove them so that you can effectively understand. Now, another barrier to effective communication is differences in perception and viewpoints. When two people see things differently. So let's say, for instance, two people could actually be looking at a certain number, and one person could be seeing 6 while the other person could be seeing 9, and that's because of the difference in their perspective, in of the difference in their viewpoints. And this is just an example. In real life, you would notice that people think of things differently, people see things, understand things differently because of their background, because of how they've experienced life differently. And so that's one of the things you need to think about when it comes to communication. Another barrier to effective communication is physical disability, and this could also be intellectual disability as well. I mentioned how people that have autism may not be able to understand things the same way that you, as an individual, may be able to understand things. So, these are things that you need to bear in mind. Another one is physical barriers to non-verbal communication. So maybe you are actually on the phone, or maybe you're hearing someone's voice, and you may not be able to see the person's face. You may not be able to, or you're chatting with somebody, and you may not be able to see the person's face and to really understand non-verbally what the person feels about what the person is saying as well. This could be a barrier to effective communication. And you see that sometimes with chats, we make do with emojis, with smileys, so that people can really understand what it feels like, what we're trying to communicate. Another barrier that you can find effective communication is language differences. When you are in an environment where a lot of people may not understand that same language you're using. So sometimes you see that efforts are made to get interpreters or maybe local people that could interpret it in their own parlance, in their own local language. Now, another barrier you can find is cultural differences. When there are cultural differences, people actually understand things differently. And you see this even across all the cultures in the world, they don't see things the same way, they don't understand things the same way. So it's important that you put all of this into perspective. When you're going to a new environment, try and understand their culture, try and know how is communication done there, right? So for instance, an area may prefer that you actually seem to do things differently, say things differently so that they can understand you. So you need to put all of these things into consideration. Now let's look at what communication is right now. What is communication like in this age, in this electronic age? You see that these days face-to-face meeting is almost behind us, right? You're hearing my voice, you're in a different location, but you're still getting this information. So we're using virtual methods of communication these days more and more than before. So you see things like mobile phones are used, cell phones are used, right? You see things like voicemail is used, the things like email is used. But there are different things that you need to understand when using all of these things. I'll call it a set of etiquettes, rules that you need to understand when you're actually using these tools for communication. So number one, for cell phone, you need to turn off your cell phone or put it on vibration when you are in meetings, when you're in lectures, when you're in training sessions, or when you're in an important place that there should be no distraction. It shouldn't be you that your phone will be ringing out loud. All right. Put your phone on vibration. In fact, as I'm recording this thing right now, my phone is currently on vibration because when it rings out, it could distract every other person. It could make people to lose focus. So you need to put other people in consideration when you're using some of these electronic tools. And then, when possible, when you actually get a call and you're in a meeting, you're in a place where you shouldn't distract others, it's proper for you to leave that place and go to another place to answer the call. Don't be the person that stays in a meeting and you're in hushed tones and everybody is hearing what you're saying. Everybody is hearing from the phone speaker. They still have to stay distracted because you did not step aside to take that call. Then also need to understand that everybody should not hear your conversation. All right. What you're saying on your phone calls, not everybody should hear it. In fact, you'll be doing some injustice to the person on the other end if he puts his or her voice on speak out and he doesn't know. Right? So respect other people's rights. They don't need to hear what you're saying. You don't need to put it on speaker for everybody to hear. All right. So you see that it's very advisable that you keep your tone low. You actually use headphones or earpiece where necessary to actually answer your own calls. And when you're actually in a meeting where there should be no disturbance, but your phone is on vibration, and you know you're expecting a critical call, make the effort to inform the convener that you'll be expecting a meeting so that they will understand when you eventually step aside to answer the call. So sometimes we just expect that everybody should understand when you step aside. But you know, this soft skills training is also preparing you for the world ahead. You may have a really important deal you need to close. Let it not be a phone call that could make everybody to, because you stepped aside to to take that call without even informing them, they'll start thinking differently about it. So these are things you need to start building into your daily culture so you start getting used to it. Right. When it comes to voicemails, voicemails are not very popular in Nigeria right now, right? But just in case you ever need to leave a voicemail for anybody, make sure that you are short and direct to the message. Do not leave a very lengthy message. All right. And then don't leave harsh or negative messages for anybody on voice calls. You may regret it, and it could even be used against you by officers of the law. So if you know you're in a very bitter mood, you have a bitter frame of mind, as at the time you want to leave the voicemail, don't do it. Okay, you need to leave positive, direct, and sharp messages on voicemails, and don't record anything that may be misinterpreted or that is very confidential, because you don't know who may be listening to that voice mail. Maybe the person you're sending that voicemail to may not even be there to receive it. Maybe someone else will receive it. You don't want that confidential information to get out there. All right. So this is the much about voicemails. Then when it comes to emails, emails are very important, very common, much more than voicemails right now. All right. So everybody needs to understand that email is going to be always there as much as the nearest future is concerned. So get to understand that your email should be formal or semi-formal. All right. Don't put confidential um, information on your emails and then you mistakenly send it to the wrong person. Always check, who am I sending this mail to? Did I fully explain what I should explain in that email? All right. Understand that email is written communication that can be used against you. So be careful when you're handling or when you're giving off confidential information via emails. Always check your grammar and your spelling and your punctuation before you send off emails. Don't treat it the same way you treat your regular chats with your close friends who may understand your slangs. All right. Ensure that your grammar is great, your punctuation is great. When you keep forming this habit, then it won't be a challenge when you actually need to send really important emails to close deals, right? Then if you're ever in a situation where you may be on leave or you may not be able to attend to your email within 3 days, within 1 week, use there are settings for every email that you're using. Use those settings to indicate that you are out of office, all right, because you need to cultivate the habit of being able to respond to mails in a timely manner. It's a good manner to respond to your mails in a timely manner. All right. So this is basically it about emails. And let's look at social media. Right, social media is something that is quite popular right now. There's not one person that I've met in recent times that is not on social media. So you need to understand that social media is beyond the place to just meet people and have fun. It's a place that you can be a brand, whether you're a personal brand or a corporate brand, right? You can start building your presence on social media to get you opportunities for jobs, opportunities to get clients. You know, you can start with social media, use it productively, and use it to actually improve and change your life. So you need to review. I don't know how every one of you may be using your social media currently. Review how you're using it. What sort of activities do you do on social media? Do you go on social media and you're joining in every argument? You're responding rudely to people? Then you need to check it. All right. Not be the sort of person that jumps into trends and you take sides so much that you start insulting a lot of people. You can actually objectively side things. You can actually objectively talk about things without being rude. So you need to check, how am I using social media? Is it positioning you as the person that is, very skilled in what you've learned so far. Whether you are in digital marketing, whether you are in mobile app development, whether you are in front end, UI, UX, graphics, any one of it. Do people on your social media know that you've gotten these new skills? Are you showing, projecting how you can help clients and people with these skills? So don't be the person that is entirely different when it comes to real life. Maybe you're trying to work so hard at something, you're trying to get a job, and on social media, there's nothing there, it's vacant. Nobody knows that you can do certain skills. Try and project yourself on social media. Review how you communicate with people on social media. Don't be rude on social media. Because, of course, as I keep saying, it's individuals that you are working with in this life. So people always remember how you make them feel. If you're rude to somebody, you don't know where you may meet the person tomorrow. And even if you don't meet the person somewhere else tomorrow, that's not the reason why you should be rude online. So check how you actually communicate on social media. And social media also helps you to get business, get sales, get jobs for yourself. So start branding yourself, start putting yourself out there, start using social media productively. So, in conclusion, always remember that communication is with people. It is with people. So, understand how to communicate with people, understand how to speak to people and make them understand what you're saying. And also understand that it's very important that at the end that your communication is effective. Ensure that you've passed your message with clarity. Ensure that the other person that you send the message to received it and understood it very well. So we've come to the end of this session. Don't forget to take your post test at this link. This is very important. You're supposed to go and take your post test here. And if you have any questions, don't forget to drop it on Slack on the help channel. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.